Thanks for watching another Todd Talk, where we take teaching theory and turn it into teaching practice. So, thus far, I've talked about many strategies that can be used in the classroom to challenge gifted students or students who are able to handle such a challenge. And what I'm going to be talking about today is a very specific strategy that you might consider and provide a structure for what that strategy might look like. First off, I'd like to give a shout out to Abby Mansfield, who I stole this PowerPoint from and just adjusted it for this particular video. But like all good teachers, you steal from those you can, and when you see a good idea, you definitely want to take that. So that is definitely what I did here. So the strategy I'm going to be talking about today is what is called 20 time. The obvious question is, what is 20 time? And so 20 time in a nutshell is the philosophy. And this philosophy was thought up by Google. And the idea here is if we give our employees 20% of their working day to work on whatever they want to work on, something that interests them, what would they be able to produce? And so the way Google set up its work day is during 80% of the day that they had to work on what they were supposed to, what they were assigned to, and then 20% of the time was just kind of this open idea, this of sharing, this free for all, where they got to explore ideas and kind of go down all sorts of avenues. And a lot of these avenues had dead ends, but they still were given the freedom and the space to do that. And so some of the things that they developed by using this 20 time is Gmail, which is used every single day by people from Google. Google Maps, Twitter, and Groupon. These were all developed during this innovative, creative thinking space that Google provided for its employees. So this man right here decided, what would it look like if we did the 20 time in the classroom? What would that look like? And so what that would look like, basically, is that students would have the freedom to be creative and produce something that's really interesting to them. But more importantly, they would be learning for learning's sake. They would be able to feel passionate about learning. They would want to come to school because what they can learn there, not because of what they're told they have to learn. And so giving students some choice, giving them some autonomy to work on something that they're very interested in is going to result in better motivation. It's going to result in them being, wanting to do an excellent job because this is something that they really feel passionate about rather than trying to get the grade. So they're going to be learning for learning's sake. So why should you do 20 time? So obviously intelligence can grow with the growth mindset attitude that we have out there. And one of its greatest causes of growth is failure. The more we fail, the more we learn. So think about a teenager who plays a video game and they're on a level and they keep getting killed. And they repeat it over and over and over. I've seen this with my daughters. They just repeat the level over and over and over until they finally accomplish what it is they're trying to do. And each time they fail, they learn something. I shouldn't do this. I should do this. This is something I want to avoid. So they're learning from this failure. And think about it in your own life when you have had moments of failure. What did you learn from those? These are probably your largest learning moments in your own experience. Traditional education, for better or for worse, teaches kids to solve problems that have definite answers. This is why we have multiple choice tests, because there are definitive answers that we want students to have. But this is lower level thinking. This is the lower part of Bloom's. We want students to be in the upper levels of Bloom's, where they're thinking, they're creating, they're analyzing, they're evaluating, they're thinking at a different level, not just for a single answer, but for a multitude of possible answers. And so how you start this is you challenge students to try to solve what is called a wicked problem. A wicked problem is simply an idea that doesn't have one single solution, or it may not have a solution at all, which is what makes it a wicked problem. So you're going to be looking at big ideas or big problems that people have been working on for hundreds and thousands of years and have been unable to solve in a traditional approach. But allowing kids to have at it is going to bring some freshness to this idea. So some characteristics of wicked problems are we don't know what made them or what caused them, so we can't get to the root of that. It could be that they have no fixed stopping point, so that problem is never going to end necessarily. Solutions are not always right or wrong. So it's not either this or that. There could be this, which would result in this, and so on and so forth. A lot of possibilities there. There's actually no way to test the solution to a wicked problem. So you don't even know if you've accomplished what you're going to accomplish. Um, it's very unique. And the problem is not always understood until the solution comes about. In other words, you are trying to formulate a solution to something and you don't even realize what all the problems are, what is causing this. So if you look at war, there's a lot more to war than just people disagreeing with one another. There's a lot of things going on there. And so trying to understand what all those moving pieces are would be really important. All right. So here is some examples of wicked problems. So climate change, poverty, healthcare, AIDS epidemic, education policy, things that are not on here, such as the mistreatment of women, human rights, things of that nature, social injustice. These are all examples of wicked problems. Poverty is one of the examples I gave, but how this breaks down is poverty affects every nation in the world. There are people that suffer from poverty. And so the question is, if this is such a large problem, how do we then solve this problem? Or how do we help with this problem? And so things like education, nutrition, healthcare, housing, these are all things that are linked to it. So if you can trace it back and solve one of these possible problems, it might help with poverty. So if you can figure out a way to get proper nutrition to everyone, you can figure out a way to cut down on crime. You're probably not going to solve crime ever, but you can certainly figure out ways to cut down on crime. These are going to help this wicked problem. So when you're trying to solve a problem doesn't have a solution or hasn't been solved yet, you may not know exactly where to go, how to get there, so on and so forth. And that is part of this process, is that you are trying all sorts of things. And all of these things are not going to work. And 9 times out of 10, you are going to fail. But again, that failure is what you're learning from. That's perfectly okay to do that. You might make mistakes, but that's part of the process. And so you need to think big. Go big or go home. When you're working on these wicked problems, because this is when you're going to be learning. There's lots of skills that kids are going to learning by doing 20 time, whether it's literacy, problem solving, creative thinking, empathizing with others, being able to communicate and connect with different audiences. These are all valuable 21st century skills that are going to benefit a student no matter what it is they're studying, whatever problem they're trying to solve. It makes no difference, but it's the skills that they're learning as they're going through trying to solve this problem. So the question becomes then, how do you do this with students? Well, you start with the obvious, is what do they want to learn? And when you're talking about a 20 time problem, it's not necessarily personal. You should care about it and it should be passionate, but it's a bigger idea. Its main goal should be to help people. That you are not the center of the project, but the main goal is to help others or help society at large. And so you have to make sure that you are creating or trying to solve problems that are large problems. So if it's something that's just specific to you, like your brother keeps coming to your room, that's not really a wicked problem. We're looking at large scale issues. So you might want to follow this process. You don't have to follow this process, but this is a process that breaks it down into several steps. So step 1 is having students come up with the idea. What do they want to try to solve? Step 2 is then kind of funneling this into a possible solution. So you're going to propose, this is the problem I want to solve, and this is kind of how I want to approach this, and so on and so forth. Step 3 is then doing the research to learn about this problem and having conversations with mentors or people that can help you who are experts on this problem. They might be able to offer their own ideas about that. You could have them create a product such as a blog. I like the blog because it allows them to be reflective, and it keeps the thought process transparent rather than kind of behind the scenes. Step 5 is then they have to develop an elevator pitch. If they had to convince someone in the elevator going from floor 10 down to floor 0, they only have that amount of time to convince someone. How would they do that? And then finally, a sharing out of this, what they learned. In this case, it would be in the form of a TED Talk. So let me break these down for you a little bit further. So the idea. So you want students to be able to brainstorm, of course, and come up with all sorts of possibilities, and go down all sorts of wild avenues. But by doing so, by doing this exploring, they are prioritizing and they're figuring out what works, what doesn't. And this is a good process for them to go through. So you encourage them to pick a topic that they're passionate about, something that they really care about, because that is going to increase the motivation. It's going to get kids really excited about working on this, because this is on their time. Um, and then it should, like, you try to tell them it's something they want to learn about too. So they should get something out of it. It shouldn't just be a regurgitation of information that they already have. This is furthering something that they may have interest in or may have some knowledge in, but they're going to take that further. They have to look at who is their audience. So whatever your end product is going to be. So if it's a TED Talk, if it's whatever, they have to determine who their audience is and then tailor their project towards that person, because they're trying to convince that person, they're trying to persuade that person that what they're doing is worthy. And the ultimate question becomes, how can they use their own passion to help others to solve this wicked problem? So how does that work with others as well? Not just them, but with others. And then I always give students the option of working alone or with a partner. And that way, if they have someone else who's equally as passionate, that they might drive one another. What you do want to avoid is students who just want to work together because they're friends, and one is passionate, one is not. That's probably not going to be a good combination. So you should group them together based on interest and passion rather than who their friends are. So once they have developed their idea, so this is what I want to do. I want to solve, global warming or whatever it is they're going to do. They need to research this and then find a mentor. So they're going to become an expert on their topic. So find everything they can. And depending upon the grade level, this expertise will be at various levels. So if you're talking about a third grader, they're just going to get a basic understanding of the problem. If you're talking about like an 11th grader, then they're going to get a little bit deeper into it and maybe with some of the root causes. So they're going to research, and part of their 20% time is them researching and learning this information. So you have to provide resources for them to do that. So this could be, some of these resources could be books, websites, magazines, newspapers, blogs. But a really good resource is finding a mentor, someone who is an expert on this, and having a conversation with them. I've always found that university folks are very generous in their time, and they're willing to talk to students about things if students are passionate about them. I once had a student who was looking at the global warming, and so she contacted Ohio State University and spoke to a professor on global warming, and then later on we come to find that he would travel to Antarctica to test the effects that global warming is having on that, and we saw him on a documentary called Inconvenient Truth. So this guy, didn't have to give any of his time to this fifth grader, but he was very generous in doing so. And so finding a mentor, it's a perfect fit, maybe a challenge, but that's part of the process of them doing this. And so this mentor is good because they can guide them. So in other words, if a student researches something and the mentor says, no, actually, you might be better to go this route. And so the mentor is just there to help guide them. And it's just another voice because you can't be an expert on everything. So them finding an expert is going to be very helpful for them. The third step is then they are going to give a proposal. They are going to have a written proposal, or they can sit down with you and talk about the proposal. But basically, they're going to form learning objectives. So what is it that they want to accomplish? This gives them guidance. I mean, you do want to provide them with some space, but you do want to also provide a structure so that they can fill that space with what they need to fill. And so this is a conversation with the teacher. And then the teacher gives their advice. You might want to try this, or you might do this, whatever. And then eventually it has to be approved. I usually try to also involve the parents and have kids sign a contract and the parents sign a contract so everyone knows what's going on. So there's no surprise when a parent's like, why is my kid doing this? And So we want to make sure they're aware of that. And so things to include on this proposal might be their audience that they're expecting, the timeline of it. So I sometimes give them a blank calendar, what the product's going to be. But basically, just figuring out the big picture of what this is going to look like, so they have something to head toward. Then they'll develop their elevator pitch. The elevator pitch is just, if you had to convince someone in 30 seconds to a minute, how would you do that? And so what they would do is they would come up with a problem statement. So what is the problem that they're trying to solve? They would explain how, if things continue to go down this path, how can things get worse? And then what are a glimmer of hope? What are things that can be done so that this can be improved or things can get better? And so then they'll explain their idea. So what is their solution to this wicked problem? And then they want to back this up, of course, with research or with expertise and things of that nature. But they want to make sure that they are not just stating something like, snap your finger and everything is going to be fine. They should base their solution on real life possibilities. And then lastly is the vision. And this is, once their solution solves this problem, what does the world look like? What is that? What does that encompass? So during this process, I like to have students work on a blog for a couple of reasons. So every week they're going to be doing a blog of 150 words at least. You can increase that or decrease that depending upon the level of your students. But the idea here is that they're answering 3 questions. The first of these questions would be, what did they accomplish that week? And so this is just kind of a checkup. So they can, and it's a reflective checkup. So this is not for the teacher's eyes, it's for the students. And so they can see, this is what I did this week, this is what I could have done better, and so on and so forth. To keep them focused and their eyes on the prize, I follow that up with the question of, what are they working on right now? So what is their plan? What are they trying to accomplish? But this being written down, it gives them more purpose. And then, of course, what is the next steps? What did they plan to do next? What do they plan to do now that they've gotten to this point? And so this is kind of just, like I said, a checkup from the neck up, where students are checking in with themselves and saying, this is what I've accomplished. And they're seeing then, that I accomplished a lot this week. Or they could be like, I didn't accomplish much this week. I have to kind of get on the ball a little bit on this. So this is a great spot for self-reflection. Allows them to kind of explore feelings that they're having, frustrations, successes, and then you can read that blog at your own leisure and decide what. I would not do it for a grade. None of this actually would be done for a grade. But even if you're doing a blog, a reflective blog, on an assignment, I never grade them, because I just want to see what they're thinking. It's not about grading it. And then they should also include an image. And that way they're having to encapsulate what they're doing into a single picture. And so it helps them to see what it looks like. The last thing is that they have to produce something. In this case, what we decided to do was a TED Talk. And so TED Talks, of course, are anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes long. And there's someone going up and trying to inspire others to solve a problem that they're facing. And so they're going to have to, in this case, they're delivering a 5-minute TED Talk. Again, you can adjust this time depending on the level of your students. So if you have seniors in high school, you might have them do a 20-minute TED Talk, and then have a presentation night for that, or record them and put them on a website. But basically, they have to explain it, to figure out who their audience is, invite that audience, and then explain to them what they've been doing and why they've been doing it. And so this is a authentic assessment. It is an authentic audience, and it allows them to try to put into words what it is that they've been working on. And it teaches them a valuable 21st century skill of public speaking. Here are some examples of student proposals that you might see or you might not see, but just to give you an idea. So it could be that something as simple as designing a basketball program for 4th and 5th graders in your district, because you see need for that. You see kids who need a place to go. It could be teaching senior citizens how to use technology. Maybe visit your grandma at a nursing home, and you notice that they need some help with that, and so you want to help with that. Developing a website so that kids who are having problems with difficult math topics can go to that and can get some guidance there. So maybe you create videos to put on that. You could put yourself in the shoes of another. So, for example, you could experience life from a wheelchair for a month, and put yourself in a wheelchair, and then you would have your blog where you're reflecting upon your feelings and thoughts from doing this. You could have a big idea, such as organizing a benefit concert, with the idea of collecting books for the library because they had a tragedy that burned down. It could be that they're doing a community garden, and planting a garden, or taking photographs that help preserve local history, and then working with the historical society in your community to kind of encapsulate this. So these are just some examples, and these are more realistic examples. They're not necessarily the big hairy problems or the wicked problems that we looked at before, but some of them might be that way. And your job as the teacher is to or as the facilitator is to try to guide them down a path of realism. So in other words, if a student says, I want to end all war, people are simply going to stop fighting. They have to understand the realism of how big this problem is and what needs to be done in order to solve that problem. So we do want them to have moonshot ideas. So shoot from the moon and have them think go big, and then they can scale back as they go along. So maybe the 4th and 5th grade basketball program originally started as an idea is I want to help students who are getting into drugs or getting into problems, or children that are doing that. And then it scales back, and eventually they're solving a local problem. But it starts with this really, really big idea. And this encourages students that they have a voice, that they have importance and value, and they can offer something to the conversation as well. And keep in mind, it's not just about making the status quo a little bit better. It is thinking about it in a whole new light. So you're getting kids to kind of think outside the box for this. So that, in a nutshell, is 20 time. There are other structures that you can use to implement such an idea, such as Genius Hour. But basically, the idea is here that you give students time to work on things that they would like to work on, that they're excited about. Learning for learning's sake, which is what we definitely want students to be able to do and to come to school to do. Not just learning what we want them to learn, but learning what they want to learn as well.